Welcome back, friends. Another weekend of tournaments has come and gone, and I got all the data here for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. Before we get started, we'll do the old YouTube pleasantries. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps push it out there for more people to see. If you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps support me, support the channel, and it'll make sure you get all my latest videos. And if you're looking for more ways to help support me and support the channel, I've created a Patreon, and the link is in the description below. Thanks, guys. Let's get to it. The first thing is the player numbers for the previous week. So last week we had 959 players with just over 3,800 for the data slate. We had just over 4,900 games played last week, with the data slate being just under 19,000. And the number of tournaments last week was 20, bringing the total for the data slate up to 64. And the first thing we're going to look at this week is the win percentage by armies. And just a quick reminder, Games Workshop acceptable win rate is 45 to 55%. Anything that falls in that range will be colored green, anything slightly above yellow, and anything way above will be red. All right, so the first thing at the top of the list here, we had Deathwatch coming at 61%, Thousand Suns at 58, Votan at 54, Demons 54, and Death Guard at 53. Down at the bottom, we had Black Templars at 30%, Drukhari at 37, Admech 38, Sisters, after a few weeks up, they're back down to 39. Gonna get another frowny face. And Astra Miltarum at 40%. So at the top, Deathwatch and Thousand Suns kind of running away with the top spot. Thousand Suns, kind of surprising. They've been struggling since the data slate dropped. And then this week, all of a sudden, they're at 58%. So I don't know what happened there specifically. And then in the middle there, we got a lot of armies that are just around the 47 to 52%, which is right where you want to be. Orcs right at 50%. So I will make a note that a lot of the tournaments this week still use the old, more DACA rules. So you will see Orcs with a higher win rate and a lot more tournament wins than you probably see moving forward once the new rules are in effect. And down at the bottom, Templars had a very unfortunate week at 30%. Sisters, like I mentioned, after a few good weeks, they had a rough week, but it looks like a lot of armies had a rough week. So I don't know if it was just a case of a couple armies doing really well and everyone else suffering because of it. The ones who have been at the bottom were way at the bottom. And Astra Miltarum down at 40%. They haven't been doing great since the nerfs, but they're never that bad. So that's also surprising to see them down that low. So 4 armies under 40% win rate for the week, not ideal. One of the worst ones we've seen in a while for armies consistently down that low, but it could just be a one-off, so we'll have to see going forward. Next up is army representation. So this is a percentage of the player base, and the average across all armies is about 3.7 or 3.8%. So if everyone is playing every army equally, everyone will be at 3.7%. So at the top there, we have Custodies, and since the data slate dropped, they've been the top spot every week, 7.6%. Demons 7.5, Aeldari 7.4, Space Marines 6.8, and Guard at 6.5. Down the bottom, Agents, not surprising, they're at 0.4%. Black Templars 1.4, Thousand Suns 1.5, Sisters 1.6, and Deathwatch 1.7. So this is kind of following the trend that it's been following for the last little while, actually, where you have sort of have and have nots. The top 6 armies make up 40% of all the player base. Custodes, Demons, Aeldari, Space Marines, Astra Miltarum, and Orcs. And that's 40% of the player base. And then at the bottom, you have less than 10% of the player base in the bottom 6. So it's kind of getting further away from sort of balanced as time goes on. Every week, it gets a little bit more skewed. Hopefully when the next data slate drops, and it's more of a comprehensive rules change and update, and especially with the new mission pack coming out, that would be hopefully a good time to really fix some of these armies that really need some help and kind of balance this out a little bit, because basically you're just kind of seeing that there's only like 5 or 6 armies that are really worth playing if you want to win. And if you look at the tournament wins and everything, it generally falls within those 6 armies. Hopefully something can be done to fix it, because ideally you want everything a little bit more even than it is right now. And this is the chart that combines win rates, XOX1 percentage, and representation, just to get an idea of how all the armies stack up when you combine all their stats. And just a reminder, XOX1 is the percentage of the players within that army that didn't lose any games or only lost 1 game in a tournament. So going 4-1 or 5-0 doesn't necessarily mean they won a tournament, but it's just a good representation of players who had strong success with the army. The higher the number, the more players performed well with the army. Lower number, obviously, the number of players performed poorly. So at the top, you got Deathwatch coming in at number 1, kind of on the back of the 61% win rate. At 25% XOX1, which is a bit above average. Average is around 17-18%. But they only had a 1.7 army rep, so if their army rep was up around the average, they'd be even further ahead of everybody. Then you have Orcs, Necrons, Demons, and Aeldari all kind of clumped together, and Thousand Suns. Now, Thousand Suns is kind of bolstered up by the 58% win rate, because they had, compared to everyone else above them, they only had a 1.5% rep, where all the other armies up there had, over 5% reps. So, the win rate's doing all the work for Thousand Suns this week. but it's usual suspects. You have Orcs, Demons, Aeldari. They're the ones winning all the tournaments right now, so it's not surprising to see them up at the top. And then down at the bottom, you had Templars, 30% win rate, 0% XOX1, so no one had any success, not surprisingly, with Black Templars last week. Then you had AdMech at 38% with a 4.3, so probably only 1 or 2 people did fairly well with AdMech. Sisters, 39, 6.7% XOX1, and then you had Drukhari and Astra Miltarum making up the bottom 5. So Votan had a good win rate of 54%, and kind of bumped them up a little bit. And then you have things like Genestealer Cults, who did have a 51% win rate, but because they're low XOX1 and they're low army rep, they're down sort of in the bottom third there. So overall, this is a good way just to look at all the armies and see, when you combine all their stats, how they're performing against other armies. And overall, most of them fall within a very similar range, except for when you get to the very top and the very bottom, which is not surprising. And those ones at the very bottom kind of mimic the ones we've seen in the previous charts. Moving on, we have the tournament wins for each army last week. So first up, in number 1, we had Orcs, as I mentioned, not surprising. Then they had Demons with 3, Genestealer Cults with 2, Drukhari with 2, and then we had a whole smattering of armies coming in with 1 each. So Orcs enjoying the last kind of week of the Mordaka. Like I mentioned, not all tournaments enforce the new rules because they kind of came in midweek, so you can't really make players change their list that fast. So moving forward, I think we're going to see a little bit of a change. This was kind of like the last hurrah for the detachment after it got nerfed, so I doubt we'll see them win as many every week. They'll probably pick up a few here and there. Demons, they're enjoying a strong run since Grotmas. They've been on the back of Legion of Excess, and now after the nerfs, they're using Shadow Legion. So they're still winning a lot of tournaments. It's been a pretty prosperous 4 months so far for Demons. And then you have Genestealers, who haven't been doing too well this Dataslate, but they picked up 2 wins this week, same as Drukhari, kind of out of nowhere. The 2 armies that really haven't been making too much noise, but they got 2 wins, which is good to see. Then you have World Eaters, Tyranids, Space Marines, Face Wolves, Necrons, Imperial Knights, Deathwatch, Chaos Space Marines, Aeldari, and Custodes all picking up a win each. And now we're going to move on to the Subfactions who won tournaments last week. So at the top, I mentioned Shadow Legion won 2. For Drukhari, it was Reaper's Wager won both, and Mordaka won 2 as well for Orcs. And then the remaining one for Orcs is Warhorde, and for Demons, it was Plague Legion. For Chaos Space Marines, Creations of Vile did pull one out, and of course for Aeldari, Devoted of Need also pulled one out. So like I mentioned, Mordaka, probably the last week we're going to see them at the top of the charts here. They might pull one out here and there, but this was kind of the last little go of it. And Shadow Legion picking up where Legion of Excess left off after their nerfs. And it was nice to see overall there was quite a few subfactions getting wins across all the different armies. This was a little bit better to see rather than just 2 or 3 armies winning all the tournaments. All right, next up is the win percentage by armies over the current data slate. So this is the last 4 weeks of data. So at the top, we still have Orcs at number 1 at 54.3%, Deathwatch at 53, Demons at 53, Imperial Knights at 52, and Necrons at 51.5. At the bottom, Drukhari at 40.5, Tau at 41, Imperial Agents at 42, AdMech at 43, and Black Templars at 43. I feel like Orcs are going to start dropping down a little bit. They've been heavily relying on Mordaka with it's like a 60% win rate so far to keep them up there. I think they'll be dropping fairly steadily and just sort of settle around the mid there, which is where they usually are. Imperial Knights have a really good run this data slate. They've been, even at the end of last data slate, they made a push and they've been up over 50% for a while now, so that's good to see. They're having consistent results. Tau and Drukhari are getting dangerously close to below 40%. Which is not what you want to see. You don't want to see any of the armies drop that low where Games Workshop makes their cutoff at 45. When you start getting below 40, that's way down there. When the highest win percentage is 54%, the mirror of that would be you expect the lowest to be around 46% in a perfectly balanced world, but we're sitting down around 40%. So that would be like having an army with a 60% win rate. So something needs to be done to help these armies, but I think they're going to have to live down there for the next couple months, I think, unfortunately. But other than that, most armies are in a pretty healthy spot. So next up is the player representation for the data slate. So this is the amount of players representing each army for the last 4 weeks. Just a reminder, the average is about 3.7, 3.8%. We have Custodes at the top at 7.7. They've been there since the start of the data slate. Space Marines at 7.3, Aeldari at 7.2, and then Orcs and Demons both at 6.2. Down at the bottom, you have Agents, not surprising, 0.3%. Then you have Templars, Deathwatch, Sisters, and Sons, and Drukhari, all under 1.5%. This is kind of mirroring the weekly results. Usual suspects at the top. Top 6 armies make up over 40% of all the player base, and then the bottom 8 armies make up only 10%. So there is as many people playing the bottom like 6 armies as there is playing custodes at tournaments, which is not what you want to see. There's definitely a major imbalance in the representation, and players know what armies are good and what armies have a chance to win. And more often than not, that's going to win out, because when you're playing competitively, you're going to have people who play what they want to play, but you have to accept that you're probably not going to win that much. And if you want to win, you're going to have to change and play with the powerful arm. So it is definitely a good indication of who's doing good and who is struggling. Now you're going to have stuff at the top like Space Marines and Orcs. They're always going to be up near the top. I mean, Orcs are up near the top now because of more DACA. And Space Marines had a good run last Dataslate, but they're just average now, nothing crazy to speak of. So they're just popular armies and they're always going to be up there. But for the most part, like Custodes at the top, it's been a while since I've seen Custodes at the top. Aeldari, obviously new Codex came out, so that's going to prop them up. Demons, they're usually like 3 to 4%, but they've been having such a strong run since Christmas that it's not surprising to see them up at 6.2. And Guard, they're always a very popular army as well, but they also have been really good up until the last few weeks, so they're up around 6%. It's not that long ago that Necrons and Tyranids were up around like 6 to 7 to 8% when they were having their strong performances. So you can definitely tell which armies are doing good and which armies are doing poor. And then you have all the loyal player base mixing in to sort of balance out some of those numbers. All right, and moving on, we have the combined stats for the Dataslate. So this is Armies win rate, XOX1 percentage, and representation across the last 4 weeks. So Orcs remain at the top. They have the 54% win rate. It's the highest. They have the highest XOX1 at 30% and a really good army rep at 6.2%. And then you have Demons, Aeldari, and Necrons kind of all lumped into that number 2 to 3 spot. And then everything else is fairly even until you get down to the bottom, where you have Agents, obviously at the bottom, usually hindered by their low rep and low win rate. Drukhari, Tau, Admech, and Templars round out the bottom, and they're all pretty close to each other, and they suffer from very low win rates and usually very low army rep. Tau is a little bit of an exception there at 3.2%, but their win rate is lower than most people's, and their XOX1 is actually a little bit lower, so it kind of drags them back down a little bit. Blood Angels have kind of been sneakily struggling since the Dataslate, 45% win rate and only a 13% XOX1, despite their 4.6% army rep. So lots of players are still bringing out Blood Angels, but they have not had much success this Dataslate, and they're actually kind of close to falling below that 45% threshold that Games Workshop puts out there. And then also Custodes, despite their extremely high player count, their win percentage is only 49%, and their XOX1 is 15%. So they had a new detachment. It's definitely a lot of fun to play, and it's definitely powerful, but it's not overly powerful where they're winning all the tournaments and they're just dominating win percentage like the Orcs are with more DACA. You're kind of seeing them propped up a little bit because of their player representation. If that was more in line with the average, they would probably be down in the middle around like Votan and Tyranids and stuff like that. So moving on, we're going to look at the tournament wins for the whole Dataslate, and this is broken down by week. So each color on the chart represents a different week, so you can kind of see where armies are pulling out their wins. So you look at the top Orcs, they've got 13 wins, and you can see that every week they're at least getting 2 wins. Demons and Aeldari both have 7, and they're getting wins every week. Then you have Space Marines with 5, Tyranids and Astra Miltarum with 4, and then you have World Eaters, Space Wolves and Necrons, and Chaos Space Marines with 3, and then you have a couple with 2, and then Admech, Dark Angels, and Grey Knights with 1, and we're still 9 armies without a win. So we should hopefully be seeing a couple of them get some wins here soon. I think last Dataslate there was only 2 armies that ended up without getting any wins, so hopefully we'll be getting a little spread, and once Orcs stop winning all the tournaments, hopefully that'll be broken down a little bit more fairly across the armies. Right now, it's obvious that Orcs are winning everything because of more DACA. It's extremely broken, but moving forward, they're going to get nerfed. So hopefully everything will be a little bit smoothed out over the coming weeks. Okay, and the first faction focus for the week that we're going to look at is Thousand Sons. So Thousand Sons had a little bit of an interesting week. For the last 4 weeks, they've been sub 50%, anywhere from like 48, 49 down to 42. This week, they bounced up to 58% win rate. It didn't translate in any tournament win. If you look at their army stats versus the meta, their win percentage is 47 versus 48. Army rep is where it kind of suffers. They're at 3.7 is the average, and they're at 1.4. XOX1 is pretty much bang on the average at 17. And their tournament wins are 0 compared to 2.4 for the average. Down at the Subfaction player count, Cult of Magic, 98% of players. So there's only a few players who brought the Grotmas detachment, Hex Warp. And if you look at the win percentage, it's kind of obvious why. They have 0 wins. So all of the wins have come from Cult of Magic. So Hexwarp Thrallband is basically unplayable at this point, and hopefully something will be done to fix that. I mean, they're going to be getting a new book here soon, but in the meantime, it kind of sucks that they give them a new detachment and then just make it worthless. There's a handful of armies that just have a worthless Grotmas detachment, and they're the ones who generally need that useful detachment because they only have the one to play with. And if you look at their ranks, out of 27 across all armies, they're basically mid to back end, except for XOX1 results, which is 11, which is right around the average. So next up, we have Astra Miltarum. This is an army that has been just kind of performing right around the average. They haven't been great and they haven't been poor. After the nerf to Bridgehead, things kind of smoothed out where they roughly should be. You look at their wins and army rep week over week, usually around 46 to 50%. This week it was a little bit of a rough week at 40%, but overall, pretty balanced rate where you want to be. Army rep is always high. They're at 5 to 7% almost. So, very popular army as always. If you look at their army stats versus the meta average, their win percentage is just below the average at 46 versus 48. Army rep is well above the average. Their XOX1 is a little bit below. So they have been struggling to sort of get to those like top tables or, perform really well at tournaments compared to the average, and their tournament wins, there's 4 versus 2.4, so they have been winning a little bit more than average. Down in their subfaction player count, for the current data slate, basically 2 detachments are doing all the heavy lifting. You have Hammer of the Emperor at 42%, and then you have Combined Regiment at 35%. So those guys are making up like 75-80% of all players are playing those 2 detachments. Then you look down at the win percentage for each detachment, and you have Hammer of the Emperor at 46, and then Combined Regiment is sitting around 50%. So Combined Regiment is actually the one doing the best at 50% win rate. Everything else is pretty much 46% or way lower. So they don't have any detachments that are broken, but they don't have any detachments that are super bad, except for maybe Siege Regiment and Recon Element, but you don't really see many of them being brought anyways. They're more of a fluffy kind of list that you play maybe with your friends or something, but I wouldn't take them to a tournament. Overall, you look at the ranks of 27, total players, games played, and rep is all in the top 6, tournament ones, top 6, and then their win percentage and their XOX1 is in the bottom 6 and 7, which is kind of surprising. They do pull out some tournament wins here and there, but overall they have been struggling a little bit to get those wins. And then down at the bottom, you can look at the subfaction tournament wins. Hammer of the Emperor 1-2, and Combined Regiment has 1-2 as well. So they're the only 2 detachments winning any tournaments for them so far, which is not surprising because that is a majority of their player base. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Just a quick reminder, if you do like the video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps support me and support the channel, and I'll make sure you get all my latest videos. And I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. I have created a Patreon for anyone who is looking for other ways to help support the channel. I have a link to the Patreon in the description. You can take a look there. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Good luck in the tournaments coming up this weekend, and we'll be back next week to take a look at the numbers. Thanks, guys. Bye.